Hello and welcome to the Movie Moolah podcast, where we have serious people on to talk about serious topics in an often silly way, generally around the business of the film industry. You know, that stuff they don't teach you in film school. With me today is David Chai. David.
Hi, Ben. How are you doing?
Good. We met years
At
ago.
the American film market.
Okay, it was at AFM. I wasn't sure if it was
Yes.
that or through, because I know you submitted your film and I stupidly turned it down at the time. Um, but it was a really good racing movie, right?
I was I had a film called CG Driver.
Yeah.
It was about a guy who is a driver. He meets up with this passenger who ends up being a trafficking victim, and to save her, he has to give up what he loves the most. So that film, I went with a company. Do you mention companies here, or I
You
guess?
can. I don't always, but
Okay. I mean, they were decent. APL. So
okay.
they took the film and they sold it to six territories: China, South Korea, Vietnam, um, Taiwan, and
Okay.
I think South Africa. So did they? It was a micro budget film, $55,000. We recouped maybe 10,000 out of that after their fees.
Well, I
Um,
mean, you got some of it back and you didn't exploit North America?
well, they did get it on Amazon Prime and Tubi through ammo content, and
Yeah,
then
I know ammo.
I didn't like that deal. We managed to get it off them, so
Mhm.
now it's released through Film Hub, and I have
Okay.
all the rights back. We did have a two 2 year performance clause to get out of that deal.
Well, that's good.
Um,
I mean, performance clauses are important. The one I wrote in when I was running Mutiny was actually an easy out clause, which was basically if you don't like working with us after 2 years, you can leave. No harm, no foul, so long as we've recouped our expenses, basically.
right,
So
that's nice.
yeah, it's a I wrote the contract that I always wanted to negotiate when I was on the other side. So
Yeah, that's something that's extraordinarily rare
mhm.
and hard to find. Some of the other sales agents were like, "Hey, we want 15 years, or we want 7 years, or," and it's
Seven's
like,
not bad. Seven's about
well,
average.
it's a very long time if they're not
Yeah.
able to sell the film.
That's true. Sorry, 7 with no performance guarantee or performance outs, not even a
No, no,
guarantee.
no
Yeah,
clauses to get out, just 7 years.
that's not so good. It's
But
also not uncommon.
we didn't
Yeah.
go with those guys. Um, I mean, what would we have done differently if we knew what we know now versus then? I think the sales agents, for the most part, it's hard to find someone who's going to be honest with you, um, or someone who has, and also the film didn't have any stars in it, so
It
it's
does
not
make it
as
harder.
though that
Yeah.
would make it easy for a sales agent. I mean, understanding that if your film doesn't have a bankable name, you're not giving yourself an easy job to sell your movie.
You're right. And I mean, even if you made it for as low as 55K, I from what I remember of the film, it looked like a lot more. Granted, that was a long time ago because I
Yeah,
thought it
I
was
mean, it was
about
shot on
racing.
the Arri Alexa.
Yeah.
The DP was extremely
Yeah.
experienced. So it's a nice looking movie.
Hmm.
Um,
If you send me a Tubi link when we're done here, I'll drop it in the uh
okay, sure.
thing for that. So, but
Yeah.
yeah. So what? I mean, what have you been doing since that movie? Been a minute.
So after the Midnight Driver, or
Hmm.
CG Driver at the time, I
Hmm.
rebranded it because CG is a Chinese word, but it's also very difficult for somebody to remember.
Hmm.
So I rebranded it as Midnight Driver, but it went to a few film festivals and won the best feature at the Long Island International Film Expo. I won best director at the Montreal International Reef Awards Festival, and it festivals are great for meeting a lot of other filmmakers. I
Yes.
wouldn't say they're necessarily great for furthering the sales potential of a film, but it's great to meet other filmmakers and to get inspiration. And one of those filmmakers who now runs the Long Island International Film Expo, Manny Serrano.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't realize he runs that now.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So Manny does a lot of horror films,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
when I met him and his wife Lindsay, they'd done
Hmm.
2 features at that point and 20 shorts, and
Hmm.
I just done my first feature. So I asked them, "What are you guys gonna do next? Are you gonna do another feature film?" And they said, "We are doing another short, actually a few shorts." And I was curious. I was like, "How come you're doing shorts after a feature?" And they said, "Well, feature takes longer, takes a lot more investment and time, and we just like making stuff, and we like to try ideas out. We like to meet new actors or crew." And I was like, "You know what? Yeah, so I ended up making 5 short films after that feature film, and um, they pretty much most of them got into festivals, um, including the Asian International Film Festival in New York,
Hmm.
um, which is great because it's been running for a very long time.
Yeah.
Um,
Did you
but the
try?
last,
Oh.
but the last short film I did was actually in 2020. It was during COVID, and a DP friend of mine was like, "I'm so bored. I've got nothing going on. Let's shoot something." And I'm like, "Okay, let."
Hmm.
And then he said, "We might have a chance to get this shown at a network."
Hmm.
And I said, "Okay, sure, why not?" So we made this short, and it did screen on the network, and they liked it. So then they said, "Hey, can you come down and meet with us?" And then they said, "Hey, um, pitch us a TV show."
That's not so bad. And you, if memory serves, you actually made that TV show, correct?
That's right. And at the time, I didn't have a specific idea that would have worked for them.
Hmm.
So I just wrote down 7 1 sentence ideas. And I basically went down the list and just pitched it to the big boss. And he liked 2 of the 1 sentence ideas. So I said, "Okay, give me a week. I'm going to expand this into a pitch deck, full Bible, and I'll come back and pitch it back to you." Um, I did so I wrote a 24-page Bible, all the
Hmm.
characters, and I had just finished a TV writing course at Screenwriting U shortly before this.
Hmm.
So and they're great if you need some screenwriting workshops, Screenwriting U. Um, so I pitched him the new series, and well, the first thing I did was, "Hey, did you have a chance to look at my pitch deck?" He goes, "Oh, sorry, I didn't have time. I didn't read it, but just tell me about it." So, so I had to verbally pitch him 10-minute pitch of the story, the characters, the world, and after that, he was like, "I like it. Let's do it."
Hmm. That's not so bad. Now, I mean, this was a procedural cop drama, right?
So
Basically.
it was a 10 episode, 1 hour serial drama,
Hmm.
police drama,
Oh,
and
it's not like, so it's not contained episodes. It's one narrative arc through the whole
one
thing.
full narrative arc
Okay.
over 10 episodes. And so the next question after that, the questions in my mind at that time was, "Oh, what does let's do it mean? Let's do it as in let's develop the scripts. What does let's do it mean?" And it's like, no. So how soon can you deliver this?
That's, I mean, how much are you gonna pay me is the question that I'd ask, but
Well, I mean, my pitch deck had a budget, had a schedule.
fair
It
enough.
had, so so let's do it included all that, and then so I had to kind of work backwards and say, well, how fast can I write? Because I wrote the whole series, and when can we start shooting, and then when can we deliver? if we start shooting at a certain date. And so this was in January 2021, and we set a date for shooting starting in June. And
It's
so I had about
ambitious.
3.5 months to write this.
It's really ambitious.
It's ambitious, and then we set a delivery date in December for the first episode.
Did you
Um,
make it?
yep, we did. We did. The 3.5 months to write it gave me 10 days to write each episode. And then um, I was the only writer on this.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, I was thinking, should I look at some of these other writers that I'm friends with? But the problem
Timing.
is, if they, it was a non-union shoot. So if we
Mm-hmm.
couldn't get a WGA writer, then most of the writers that are non-WGA do not have the kind of experience I would have needed.
Yeah.
And if I got somebody who wasn't able to write fast, that would have been worse to
It
bring
would have
somebody
hurt you
on.
a lot because you would have lost. Yeah, I've been in that position. I feel
So
you.
I thought, okay, well, I can write fast, so I can write it and I can look for feedback. And I had a team. There was 5 producers on this
Mm-hmm.
because you just cannot do something of this scale by yourself.
No.
Um, and and two of the producers on the team, they came from a law enforcement background. Their father used to work in the Secret Service. They knew plenty of police officers as friends,
Mm-hmm.
and they themselves also knew a lot about the technical stuff of police. And I didn't know anything about police when I started. So first
Mm-hmm.
thing I did was go to Amazon and buy a whole bunch of books written by police NYPD officers about, being a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
And my rationale for that is, well, somebody's spending 2-3 years writing this book, they're going to put a lot of their most interesting cases, most interesting stories and experiences in there. If I interview a police officer, how long would I need to interview them to get some of this stuff?
Yeah, it's true.
So reading those books was a shortcut to getting into the mind and getting into a lot of these. And at the same time, I would crawl all these websites to look at headlines of different cases, real cases, things that were interesting, and I would try to use that as inspiration for some of the storylines.
That's
So
smart.
then, after I write an episode, the first episode I sent it to some of my writer friends and was like, "Hey, give me some feedback on this pilot." And the difficulty of TV versus a film is not finished, and they don't necessarily know where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of suggestions weren't necessarily as useful as a finished script is for like a feature film script.
Mm-hmm.
But when I gave it to my team, the other 4 producers, to give feedback, that was more insightful because they knew the outline, they knew what we were trying to achieve. So going forward, I was like, okay, I'm just going to do a draft, send it to my team, and then after that, make revisions and then send it to the network for network feedback.
Mm-hmm. How were studio notes on this project?
I think I got 2 notes for the whole 10 episodes.
It's not many.
No, nothing.
Yeah.
And they were really good notes. And we definitely changed. And this is one thing that I've um, heard from other people. If you get suggestions from a network, they're not suggestions. You just
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 incorporate them. They're not. It's not.
just
Yeah.
do them. And that goes for casting too. If they suggest, I like this actor, not that actor, and I always presented for the leads, certainly I presented them with a few
Mm-hmm.
options. If they make a choice, you say, great, let's love your
That
choice.
was my favorite too. Let's go. But yeah, I've been there. It's a it's very true.
You are not really there to, I mean, the choices that I put in front of them were already choices I vetted. So it wasn't as though I didn't like them.
Mm-hmm.
But if they have a preference, You just have to go with it.
Yeah. No, it's a
And
collaborative process, and
mhm.
sometimes notes are less notes and more you want my money, right? But that's a sad truth of the business, I suppose. So, uh, were you always anticipating this to be a single 10 episode arc, or were you hoping for a renewal, or where'd that go?
So the so this network NTD, they are fairly young in the sense that they started off 20 years ago as a Chinese language network,
Mhm,
and about 3 4 years ago they launched the English channel version.
mhm,
And their background is more news and current affairs, documentaries. So for them, this was something new. They hadn't done a scripted series before.
mhm.
And as a consequence of their background, they didn't have a very strong marketing and PR team to really make full use of this. So I would like to have, a second season. It's not off the table. It just hasn't happened yet.
I mean, so you said it was how are they affiliated with the Epoch Times, or was there
Yeah.
something
So,
in the link you sent?
so Epoch Media Group,
Mhm.
um, and NTD are like sister companies.
Okay.
NTD is under the umbrella. So, as a consequence, Epoch have a streaming service called Epoch TV, and the
Mhm.
show is currently on Epoch TV.
That
Uh,
makes sense.
uh, yeah, but they are open to licensing this out to other platforms and or broadcasters. So that's something I'm actively pursuing at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think on camera. I haven't actually seen the whole 10 episodes, but I have seen the sizzle, and the sizzle is fantastic, frankly. More normally it's a high bar to get me interested in cop serials, and I'm actually interested, which is highly unusual. But the I also just have an incredibly long watch queue. Nothing against you.
No
Um
problem. Yeah, one
the
of the goals I wanted to do was to stay away from a typical cop show. It was almost
Mhm,
like, well, what don't we see or what don't we normally see in a cop series? And
mhm,
what's interesting, I didn't want to rehash a cop show that I'd seen in the past either. So
mhm,
getting to the back to the Amazon books and reading from direct experiences from the police officers, I was trying to say, okay, well, what here is really interesting when I read their books? What
mhm,
about their experience is different? Or and one of the things, the takeaways is, what's the human impact of being a police officer?
mhm,
Because they experience the full range of human emotions, and a lot of times, if you look at Law and Order, the cases are kind of, we have a problem and we solve it by the end, but how does that even affect you as a human, as a person? So that was something interesting for me. I wanted to explore that and kind of show what other police shows did not show. And also a lot of the cases I wanted them to be based on real stuff. So I
mhm,
most of it is inspired by real things happening in in our world today.
mhm,
There are two specific. One of them is there's a police officer that was under investigation for being a spy for the Chinese government in and he works for the NYPD, used to be a former army person. That so that was inspiration for one of the characters to say, well, what if this person's using this as a perfect way to get inside intel on any targets of interest?
that's yeah, that's really interesting, and that kind of adds a lot of uh I have a soft spot for espionage thrillers.
Oh,
Um
gotcha. Yeah.
so yeah, that's a that just moved it on my watch queue a bit. But the no, that sounds really interesting. And you kind of took an interesting approach in that you took kind of the Dick Wolf model, and I just said Dick Wolf instead of Law and Order because it's way more fun to say. The and applied it in almost like a more wire format. Am I categorizing that correctly? Summarizing correctly?
Yeah, I mean, definitely trying to expand beyond just here's a case and we solve it.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to dig far deeper, and if you get personally attached to the characters and you want to see them succeed, or you know the challenges they face, because um, I didn't want to just paint some rosy picture of the police force either.
Mm-hmm.
There are good cops and bad cops in the series. There are good people and bad people. It's trying to be more reflective of how New York really is.
Yeah, you didn't want to just make a piece of propaganda, basically. You wanted to make a you wanted to tell a compelling story about a demographic, or I guess set of people that don't often get totally true stories told. Is that about right?
Yeah, because a lot of cop shows, I think, kind of gloss over a lot of things. They try to
Mm-hmm.
paint it more as good guys versus bad guys, but
Mm-hmm.
I see it as much more complex than that. Because
Yeah,
someone is a good guy, normally they can still make a bad decision,
entirely. Yeah, and it's
and
sometimes hard to deal with that just in general life. I think that having more media out there that tells those complex narratives will help us
and
as a society.
also this is, remember, this is 2021, and we just had all these fires and riots in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Stores were vandalized, and there was this whole backlash, defund the police movement,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, okay, well, what would be a very interesting story to tell here? So the one of the main characters is a protester who becomes a police officer, an anti-police protester. And why does she do that? But also, when she does become one, it's not as though she's suddenly pro-police all of a sudden. She
Mm-hmm.
still has all these notions and ideas of what policing should be. And one of her thoughts is, maybe I can change it from the inside.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really empathetic narrative for a lot of people. I mean, that's part of why I have the role I have in the film industry, is trying to treat filmmakers better on the sales and distribution end. And I, yeah, it's a very compelling thing, and it always ends up significantly harder to change a system from the inside than you expect it to be
Mm.
when you get started. Um, so is the film only available in the US?
So Epoch is international. Um, so it's on the streaming platform, Epoch
Okay.
TV, but it is SVOD. You have to subscribe to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Have they considered trying to do, like, just broadly aggregate to the AVOD places in order to frankly increase their own visibility? Because I didn't even know Epoch had a TV system.
that's a good question. I actually don't know.
Fair enough.
I know they're investing heavily on documentaries for their SVOD platform
Mm-hmm.
to retain and generate more subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but scripted is more expensive, so that's definitely
Especially now.
something I hope they come back to in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's a even places like DC, like HBO and DC, are still licensing some of their big content out. It's the pure only on our streaming platform model is not exactly what it used to be.
No, I think
Um,
everyone's realized that monetization is not just about keeping it on your own space, because after those people have seen it, it's not really generating value anymore. So why not give it to another platform that has a different set of audience?
and you might even draw some to you for the new season. I
Exactly.
mean, I think it's a good model to do that. And for a while it went away, but it seems to be coming back. Like, there's a really interesting video, and I'm forgetting who did it. might have been Captain Midnight. Just about what The Office leaving Netflix did for the brand of The Office.
Mm.
And because they were really using it to try to drive people to Peacock,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't work, basically. It's a just viewership and cultural awareness of The Office kind of just dissipated once it was only on Peacock, because I like Peacock. Peacock for a while was the number one payer of royalties, and that was great. But I don't know, if you just don't have the viewership, it doesn't matter too much.
They have around what, 30 million?
I mean, I think they have. It depends on how you quantify it. I don't actually know their active users, but the only thing that really matters is at minimum monthly active users. Really, you want more weekly, to get an idea of what actual sort of viewership you can get from that. And I didn't expect this conversation to go here, so I didn't actually pull up the various subscriber and user counts of these platforms, but it is notable. And frankly, when you're considering something as a filmmaker, especially if it's an exclusive deal, it is one of the metrics you should look at.
Mm.
Obviously, what they're paying you as an MG and all of that, you should definitely consider as well. But you should look at what the cultural awareness is going to be. Like, as an example, I believe Amazon Prime's viewership numbers are well into the 9 figures in the US.
Mm.
And that's a lot of people, but most of them really aren't that active. That might even just be their subscriber count, and pretty much less than 10%, at a guess, actively use the video services. Most of us have it for free shipping. It's
Right. Yep.
just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's kind of why some of the marquee series for Amazon are done at a premium. Like, they end up paying 20 to 40% more than another network would pay, because the people making it know that I'm not going to see residuals. This isn't going to help my career as much because nobody's going to hear about it, because nobody actually is really active on Amazon despite their gargantuan subscriber number. All opinions based on public information, nothing insider there. Sorry. Sometimes I had to put that disclaimer out there. Um, but
Fair
yeah.
enough. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of the streamers' content is, I don't know, somehow it just feels like it's gone through less of a development process
Yeah.
than the traditional studios or broadcasters, because broadcasters typically have a huge hand in the development.
Okay. So it sounds like in your experience as a showrunner, though, they didn't have that much of a hand in
Well,
your film.
that was a surprise to me as well.
Yeah.
I expected a lot more notes, a lot more feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but generally speaking, the show was extremely well received. It has a 8.6 on IMDb,
Ooh, that's very good.
and on Epoch TV they have comments under
Mm.
each episode, and I would say maybe 70% of the notes or comments are can't wait for a season 2.
That's great. I mean, like, if you're getting 70 to 80% on that ratio, you're doing very well. Even my tiny YouTube channel right now, I get like maybe 80 or 90% positive, and then I get random just swear words at you for no reason. It's but I mean, hey, if you want to comment swear words at me, go ahead, have fun. Engagement helps. The But yeah, it's a weird marketplace, and it's a weird thing overall, the internet, I suppose. We're kind of unfiltered jerks. I'm trying not to swear in this episode for personal challenge. Um but the yeah, so are you working on anything else? Or what are you doing to fill your time and pay the bills, since you're on hiatus from being a
Right, for
showrunner.
that series. So I don't know if you've heard of Angel Studios. Probably everybody has by now, but
Mhm,
they have a process where you can submit a video called a torch
mhm,
to try and pass through Guild, because the whole thing is crowdfunded or
mhm,
crowd. But the way it works is you submit a video, and their members called the Guild vote on the video. And if they vote, there's two questions they ask. One is, does this project amplify light? Because that's their main mission at Angel.
mhm.
Even though it is run by Christians, or they don't, it's not a purely Christian mission
Mhm.
on that platform. So does it amplify light? Yes or no? If it's no, pretty much
You're
you're
out.
dead.
Yeah.
And then the next main question is, how disappointed would you be if Angel did not fund this project? Very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or not disappointed. And you need to pass 40% saying very disappointed.
Mm.
That's the bar. If you get past 40%, you're pretty much in to the next stage, where they now will try to help you get it financed and distributed and marketed.
That's
And
interesting.
less than 6% of projects get past the guild. But the ones that do get past, they have massive support behind it, as you can see with Sound of Freedom.
Yeah.
But even they had a His Only Son, which came out in Easter.
Mhm.
That was I think about a sub $500,000 film, and it made about $15 million in 2 weekends or 2 weeks.
I mean, even once you account for the probably at least a 65% take by the theaters there, that's huge on an ROI.
Yes, and the reason they can do that is, and the reason they have that crowd vet the project before it gets financed is,
Mhm.
these guys become active promoters and champions of the project. They help to push it to their church groups, push it to their friends, and effectively help the project become profitable.
That's fantastic. I mean, it is a finding those early adopters and those just the loudest people in your audience who will just shout about you is always the hardest part. So, you have something going through the guild right now, or
So I'm in the process of putting a video together to submit to the guild.
okay? Well, I record fairly far ahead of when I release, so I always have a pipeline going. Um, so it might be ready by the time it's there. If it is, I'll drop a clip in a card or a link in a card here. So
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
Basically, what I like about their process is
Mhm.
anybody can submit. It's not a
Yeah.
closed door, and it's very transparent. Um, they give feedback on what your votes actually were, so you'll know how far off you are. And if it's close, you can actually do a re-edit and resubmit.
Okay.
So,
That's really
and some
interesting.
projects failed first time but got past the second time.
I mean, they clearly did well with the Sound of Freedom in terms of just straight business. I'm not, for clarity, I'm not talking about politics here or anything. It's not a political show.
Right.
But the box office numbers of Sound of Freedom are really,
Staggering.
yeah.
Staggering.
Um, and I mean, I've heard some things that some of those are inflated, which
Well,
I believe.
they
Yeah.
have a pay it forward model,
Yeah.
which they created when they did the TV series The Chosen.
Mm-hmm.
There's this whole storyline about how they were in a lawsuit with Disney, and they need to make a certain amount of money by a certain time, or else the company was going to go bankrupt, and they were SVOD, but they changed that to a pay it forward model,
Mm-hmm.
donate to let other people see it for free. And they made 4 times the amount of money. They made just enough to stave off bankruptcy. Um, Disney had a new legal counsel team, and then their $62 million judgment against them got reduced to $10 million, which they had to pay off over 10 years or something. Which, that's easy for them at this point.
Yeah.
But basically, that was created out of necessity, but they've used that because obviously they're trying to promote from a biblical standpoint, promote Christianity. But in the case of Sound of
Mm-hmm.
Freedom, it's more about the cause, because I don't know if you've seen the movie, but it doesn't really talk about Christianity at all in the film.
I did not get that sense. But that actually explains something. I saw some uncorroborated reports on social media that basically they actually went to see Sound of Freedom, and even though these box offices numbers were gigantic, a lot of the theaters were just barely packed at all, like hardly anybody in there. And if there is a
Um,
pay it forward, that would make sense.
yes, but I think officially somebody asked how many of those tickets were paid forward,
Mm-hmm.
and I forget who it was that said probably less than 7 or 8%
Oh
of
wow, that's way
their.
less than I expected.
When
Um,
I went to see the movie,
yeah,
um, yeah, the theater was 80% full,
okay.
and this was not the first few weeks. This was probably like week 3.
Sometimes they do, I mean, rarely, but sometimes there is a later peak in viewership on it. That's kind of what the limited release model was trying to capitalize on back in the day under,
And I saw it,
yeah,
in a little town in upstate New York, not in a major metropolitan. So,
makes
um,
sense.
so
What
from
town?
Middletown.
Middletown. Okay. My mother and grandparents lived in a town outside of Rochester called Hilton.
Oh, okay.
I've heard of Middletown. I haven't been there, but yeah. Um, yeah.
Mm.
The No, that's really interesting. And again, I only have uncorroborated reports on that. And when I said they probably inflated their numbers, that wasn't a slight against
Oh,
the Sound
sure.
of Freedom. It was just almost a universal concept, basically. So it's
I
a
think it's a genius marketing campaign, honestly. You can say, hey, you can
mhm.
watch this movie for free, but it makes you actually investigate, well, what's this movie?
Yeah, that's a I think the pay it forward model, especially on a faith-based platform, um is genius marketing,
Genius.
basically. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it is such a great call on that. And it's not necessarily my demographic personally, but it is I can appreciate good marketing wherever it comes from. But the yeah, so that's really interesting. Have you do you do a lot in the faith-based space or do
No,
you
I'm not a Christian myself,
mhm,
but I do recognize is some crossover in terms of wanting to
mhm,
bring positive things into the world and
mhm,
talk about real issues that a lot of people are dealing with in a way that's more constructive or leads to discussion that might actually lead to change, as opposed to just wallowing in, hey, the world sucks, life sucks, just
mhm.
just burn it all down, or let's focus on serial killers or people that are gangsters and criminals, which
I could agree with you there. I mean, I've distributed a lot of horror movies and things like that, but at some point it is a I have a business to run and mouths to feed. So and that's what I know will sell. The other thing that sells really well is faith-based films. It's almost universal. I specifically don't do a ton in that market. I mean, I've been on the Ministry of Motion Pictures podcast twice. And I have a great respect for the models that faith-based filmmakers use to get their work out there. It's just feels disingenuous if I'm the one running it directly as opposed to working with somebody who is a person of faith, because I'm not. I told my father-in-law, asked if I was going to marry his daughter in a church, and I said, "No, we don't want a sunburnt groom. Just that's not gonna help." But it's different strokes, different folks, basically.
Right.
Um,
Everybody, yeah,
mhm,
being tolerant and being accepting of other people and being understanding. It's okay for you to have a different idea and a different way of
mhm.
living. The only problem is if you're now saying, no, you can't do what you're doing and you have to be punished for that, as opposed to, live and let live, man. Like,
Yeah,
not,
no, I agree. I think it's a we are very, very polarized even in media, which is
media,
disappointing. Yeah.
politics, spiritual beliefs, personal philosophies.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things I wanted to do in the TV series was not to, I might have my own personal beliefs about something, but the character doesn't need to have that belief at all because
Mhm.
that character isn't me. In fact, they might do the exact opposite of what I want. And if it makes sense for the story, that's what's important.
Oh yeah. No, I've distributed movies that had overall messages I didn't agree with, but that person had a right to say it, and I thought there was a market for it, so I helped it reach its market, basically.
Yeah,
That's
and
yeah.
and to me, being mindful, especially about the political divisions now, especially about
Mhm.
the police, and I've certainly had some friends come up to me say, "Oh, you're promoting the police," and I'm like, "But there's bad police in my show too. There wasn't. This isn't a glamorization
Mhm.
that's one-sided."
Yeah, I mean, there is a big problem with some media around cops in the military kind of falling into a trap of, well, that's probably a harsh way to say it, but especially with the military, you normally have to go through a pretty rigorous media process in order to use any military assets like planes, boats, anything, which means that it does end up being overwhelmingly positive towards the military in most of those instances. And I've heard the same can be true for cop shows. Did you run into anything like that?
So we actually had to apply to get a license from the
Hmm.
NYPD to use their image likeness logos,
Hmm.
and um, they just look at your outline, um, and make a determination. But we got approval.
Okay.
Um, we didn't hide that we're discussing topics and there are corrupt police in there, but it still passed. And because we shot with people in uniform on the street, you have to have the police with you when
Hmm.
those scenes are being filmed. And at the beginning, the police unit that is in charge of film and TV in New York were a little kind of trepidatious because how are these guys going to present us?
Hmm.
Are they going to be negative or not? And they weren't
Hmm.
very nice to us. At the beginning, they would do things like they would leave an hour before we had finished their booking time
That
to
sounds like
go.
it could provide problems for you.
Yeah, because we couldn't keep shooting with the people in uniform. And part of that, I mean, that happened twice.
Hmm.
And basically, thinking I had an hour and 15 minutes to shoot something, and suddenly I've got 15 minutes to finish shooting it. Um, which was like, wow, okay, all right, let's just go. Action.
Yeah.
That was not fun, but we're able to work around it by shooting all the police stuff in that 15 minutes, and then when we shoot the reverses without the police uniforms
Yeah.
in it.
Did they
But
request? Oh, go ahead.
they but after that, the first two times that never happened to us again.
That's good.
They, because you see the same faces. They do have 15 different police officers in the film and TV unit in New York,
Yeah.
and they do rotate, but you do see some of the same faces, and they were definitely much friendlier after they had got to know us. And I
Hmm.
wonder if part of that was just kind of, yeah, we give them a little bit of a challenge, see how they handle this.
Yeah, that's. I wouldn't be surprised on that. I mean, I'd also imagine that the NYPD um is just more accustomed to dealing with shoots than like Middletown's police department would be and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, what I find amazing about the New York, the NYPD,
Hmm.
is that you don't have to pay for the film and TV unit. It's part of the New York City's drive to get more film productions in the city. But if you
Hmm.
go outside of the city, you go to Westchester, you go to Yonkers, you go to Middletown, you do have to pay for the police. And we
Yeah.
were looking at Westchester County until we saw how much money they were going to try and extort from us.
Oh yeah.
And and then I was like, yeah, no.
So San Francisco makes you pay for the police and everything else like
Right.
you'd expect, but the city will reimburse you for every cent of city services, including police on set, after the
Really?
shoot's done. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
a interesting application of the city tax incentive. And New York's way seems to just kind of cut out the paperwork a lot more, but
Right.
it is a I kind of prefer New York's way, but San Francisco at least has an answer to these,
Right.
which is better than nothing. The No, that's all really interesting.
Yeah, there are some interesting things too.
Mhm,
If you're shooting inside a building,
mhm,
you don't need them.
that makes sense.
And there was one case where we're inside a deli and the door is glass. And we were asking them, do we need you here for that? And they said, you're inside the deli? Yeah. They said, no, you don't need us, even though the door is glass. And we kind of cheated a little bit because he had to walk into the door from outside. So, but what we did was,
Nobody knew. It's fine.
but what we did was we had somebody with wardrobe with a cover. So as long as they're covered when they're not filming,
Hmm.
so even if they have the uniform on, but you put a jacket over or
Hmm.
some kind of cover so they could go out and eat lunch or something like that. But they have to be super mindful because, they have prop guns. And even though the prop guns are sometimes they're rubber, they don't fire anything, but it looks like a gun on a
Yeah,
holster. They can't just walk around. We have to make sure, okay, give those to wardrobe before you walk outside. And we don't want people calling the real cops on us in those
that's
cases where we don't have the unit already with us.
no, that would be very bad. One
Yeah,
thing that
and
happened. Oh, go ahead.
yeah. So there was one shoot. We had a shootout staged on the street, and of course, the film unit's with us. They check all your gun props at the beginning
Hmm.
of the day when they get there to make sure that they're not real guns, they're props. And then sometimes other police officers that are in the area would come by just to have a look because they know
Hmm.
that you're shooting there.
I mean, it's interesting that you get looky loos whenever you shoot anything in public. In
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I was really grateful to have them because
Mhm.
some of those neighborhoods were pretty sketchy. We shot in West Harlem one
That
night
yeah.
at night, and the producer told me afterwards was like they could hear the police radio and there was stabbing like 3 blocks north of us. There was a shooting 2 blocks south of us, and the police unit said to us, "Hey guys, you might want to wrap this up fairly soon and get out of here." And then they had to race off when after they said that because they had to stop two gangs from open having open warfare on the street just south of us.
That's not great. I mean,
But yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So nothing happened to us. We wrapped up pretty quickly after that and got out of there. But it was interesting, and they would definitely say to us, "Hey, you guys know how to pick the neighborhoods."
Yeah, I mean, look, I live in Northwest Philadelphia, in like Germantown on the Mount Airy border sort of thing for anybody who's watching. But I'm not super scared with where I live, but man, West Harlem would scare me. And I also used to live in the Tenderloin in San Francisco. So I am accustomed to not great neighborhoods. And West
Oh,
Harlem would be
I,
scary.
I would say the scariest location we shot at was probably Long Island City,
Really?
south of Astoria. Not in the nice part, in the public housing
Okay.
sort of projects part of Long Island City.
Hmm.
There was a studio in one of the buildings, but I didn't see any of this. But all these different people were getting solicited for drugs outside, and one of the producers walked past this group, this gang that were literally just checking out their guns on the street. There must have been like 10 gang members with their guns out in public view, not caring that they're fully visible. And then some dog walker said to him, "You guys really you shouldn't really be here. Like, you shouldn't be here. Like you should leave. This is dangerous."
Not a place you should hang out. Yeah, no, I used to do karaoke at a bar at in San Francisco at that was very, very close to 6th and Market. And anybody who is watching this from San Francisco is like when I say that. But the I had a very similar situation. I was hanging out with a friend who was smoking a cigarette, and we were just chatting there. It's like, yeah, you guys should not be here. This is
Hmm.
not safe for you. You should go. Um, but yeah, so I know that pain and I know that fear, and it's I never really had anything bad happen there, but it's probably luck more than anything.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was glad to get out of that neighborhood. But it was funny because I was inside the studio the whole time. I only heard
Mhm.
about this afterwards because there was other crew members or people that were walking around outside,
Yeah.
and I didn't know. I mean, it
I
definitely felt sketchy, but I just didn't personally see any of the drug dealers or gang
mean,
members
look,
outside.
if you just look straight ahead, hands in pockets, walk fast but not run, walk like you have somewhere to be. Not more than 9 times out of 10, you're probably fine. Just mind your business. Don't do shit. Basically, it's don't stir up shit, and there won't be shit. But damn it, I swore. Um, Made it to the end. Um, but anyway, so on that note, I'm gonna move to the 3 questions I ask all of my
Okay,
guests
all
towards
right.
the end. Um, you can answer the first question second. Just tell me to move on to the second if you need a second to think, because it sometimes takes a minute. So that first question is, what are your top 3 favorite movies as it stands right this second now? They can change in 5 minutes. But just vibes, how you're feeling now.
Oh boy, such a wow. That's a hard question.
I know, which is
It's
why I
so
use
hard
it.
because I mean, there's the classic movies I love, like
Mhm.
Star Wars or
Of course.
Jaws or Raiders of the Lost Ark. But um, you know,
Mhm.
and recently, um, top three. Wow, that's such a. um, I mean, one of the I guess one of my favorite films in the last 5 years, I would say,
Mhm.
would be Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Across,
Yeah, the first
not the
one.
first one, the new one.
No, no, in no the first one is Inside the Spider-Verse or
Into the Spider Verse, I
Into the
think.
Spider-Verse. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the first one.
Okay.
I saw the second one, it's okay, but the
Okay.
first one was to me one of the greatest.
It was incredibly unique and very, very good. I
Right.
agree. Yeah.
Um, and I know it's a high bar. I I just go back to a lot of the films that I loved in the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
Um, like favorite action movies like Die Hard or Lethal Weapon. And I think because if you look at the amount of screen time of drama versus action, there's actually more screen time to drama.
Yeah.
And a lot of the action movies now is 90% action and 10% drama.
Yeah.
And you look at James Bond, you basically have no idea who that character is. You have no idea who the bad guy is because there's just set piece to set piece to set piece to set piece. And in a John Wick kind of film, that's okay because you don't need to know that much about that character.
Yeah.
But the early Bond, there's a lot more talking. There's a lot more seducing or schmoozing or.
I agree. I have a like I said, I have a soft spot for espionage films, and high among those are some of the James Bond and all of the Mission Impossible. So
Oh yeah, yeah, and Jason Bourne, um, the Bourne Identity.
yeah.
I love those films.
Hmm.
Um, that kind of answers your question with more than three, but
We'll call it good. You're not the first to do that. I do, to quote Bert Kreischer, Secret Time. I actually used to use that when I was still single and not wearing this. I'd use that question as an opener in a bar
Mm.
with people I was trying to date. It worked really well. So tips, Secret Time. The second question: if you could go back in time and give yourself a single piece of advice, where would you go back to, and what would that advice be?
Hmm. I probably just say if you're going to be a director, just direct, just do more, just direct, because I kind of had this idea that, and I stopped directing for a very long time because my I did a short film in film school in 2000, and I
Mhm.
graduated 2000, and then I didn't do another short film as a director until wow, until it was many years later. It was I worked in the industry in post production,
Mhm.
but it was this idea that I had to learn so much more about everything else before I could start doing this because I felt this such an important job and role. You really need to know a lot,
I mean,
and
that's true, but you also need to have a specialization, and like you
right,
need to be good at directing. Like you can supplement your lack of skills by hiring good people around you. The biggest thing you need to know as a director is how to craft the story and how to work with actors. And if you know those two things, you can supplement the rest and learn it as you go. That's my philosophy, but I'm a producer, so I could be wrong.
yes, and definitely because and part of after I made my feature, making more short films after that was there's um don't poo-poo shorts because one short led to my TV series, but you do need to practice, and it takes much longer to get financing for a feature or a big project. Don't stop working on things just because you're in between. You
Oh yeah.
should be directing or writing, or even if it's just getting some people together, shooting a
Mhm.
bunch of scenes, um, just so that when you step back into the director's chair, you're not like, wow, it's been so long, it's so rusty. Like you have to get back into a groove.
Yeah. No, that's it's it's a skill set, it's a muscle, it will fatigue over time, it will atrophy over time. You need to keep yourself up on it, and if doing shorts is the most feasible way to do it, that's probably what you need to do. Going back to episode 10 of this podcast, and Tim Travers and Time Traveler's Paradox only came to be because we had made the short earlier that year, and then when lots of other stuff happened between, we found ourselves with a production window and no feature to shoot, so we adapted Tim Travers into a feature, and that's how that came to be. And that's not that's not exactly a common story, but it parallels a lot of very common things that can happen. So the big thing I'm saying there is just keep your skills sharp and work on furthering the goals you want to further and becoming the professional you want to be. Is me, I guess, processing your point around directing. Is that loosely
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. You
Yeah.
it is a muscle, it is a skill set that needs practice and
Mhm.
needs time to get comfortable and get good at it. And one of the most important things is being able to make up your mind quickly, know what you want and get it quickly. Because when you're on the clock and you have crew members waiting around, the day's going, the sun's leaving, you better make fast decisions or else you're just not going to have that shot or not going to finish the
Sure.
scene.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
decision making is a muscle of its own, and being
right.
able to make quick decisions is vital for any department head, especially a director. The Yeah.
Yeah, on most we had 76 shoot days on the TV series and we probably went
That's
into
pretty quick.
overtime. Sorry?
Pretty quick. That's just like about 11 days per episode. That's not.
7 to 8 days per episode.
Yeah, I did bad math. You're right. 7 to 8 days per. That's quick.
It's it's okay. I mean, it's not the fastest, it's not the slowest.
Mm-hmm.
Um but we only went into overtime maybe once a week um past 12 hours. I tried to keep things moving fast and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the reasons why we went into overtime though it's not because of me.
There are always things you can't control. It's a
Right, the
Yeah.
DP takes too long or something's not ready or you have some problems with piece of gear.
Most of the time they frown on you throwing gaff tape at your DP when they're taking too long. It's generally not wise. But the that makes sense. So then the final question, this one is exceptionally harder than the other two.
Mm.
Um, what are you looking for and where can people find you?
What am I looking for?
Like, if somebody were on this podcast to reach out to you, what would you want them to reach out to you about?
Well, always looking for financiers, of course.
Oh, we all.
I've got plenty
Um,
of projects ready
mhm.
to go. Where can people find me? Um, they can find me on Instagram, David Chai _ director. They can
Mhm.
find me on Facebook. And I am on Twitter, but I don't check that often. Or now it's
Nobody checks
called
Twitter
X.
anymore, literally. Because it's now this, which is dumb.
So,
So,
don't find me
yeah,
on this.
yeah.
But Instagram is probably the easiest
Mhm.
because if I don't know you on Facebook, I won't necessarily connect. But Insta is easy, and then LinkedIn, of course. I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us, David. This has been the Movie Moolah podcast. I remain your host, Ben Yenny. And if you like this podcast, you should sign up for the free independent film resource package through theguerrillarep.com/resources, link in the bio. You'll get a free investment deck template, free festival brochure template, free ebook, white paper, and a whole lot of other stuff, including a monthly blog digest of content, not just blogs, but podcasts like this, segmented by topic, to help you learn to be the best professional you can be on a manageable time schedule. Thank you very much, And please like, subscribe, and set this podcast to auto download if you made it this far. That helps grow it significantly. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Ben.